So I watched Project Hail Mary and it was great. Everyone seems to be enjoying this one. Honestly, I don't remember the last time a movie united, well, everyone. If you haven't seen Project Hail Mary yet, go out and watch it for two main reasons. First, I honestly want more movies written in the spirit of Project Hail Mary. Remember the phrase from my millennial writing video, I want that, but different. Yeah, I want that, but different. This movie is the perfect antidote to the last decade of nihilism and deconstruction. Enough is enough, and it seems that even Hollywood is realizing that if you keep deconstructing all the symbols that give life meaning, you're kind of left with nothing in its place. At least nothing that would animate the human spirit. But not that this movie needs my endorsement, it's making quite the buck, and deservedly so. It's a great 10 out of 10 experience. In screenwriting terms, this movie does everything right. Which gets us to the second reason. You can stick around and watch me break down this movie because I'm gonna spoil everything. Don't worry, I'll put up an unmissable spoiler sign once we enter spoiler territory. You won't regret sticking around because Project Hail Mary is the perfect opportunity to showcase how you make actual millennial writing work. Because what we colloquially call millennial writing is just a lack of writing standards. The quipping that so many have come to despise was actually introduced by Gen X writers and was later adopted by millennials, just without any sense or rules. What's interesting in Project Hail Mary's case is that we got two Gen X writers, Andy Weir, who wrote the book, and Drew Goddard, who adopted it for screen. When you look at the quips in the book and the constant pop culture references thrown at the reader, well, I can't help myself but cringe. This is not good dialogue, but almost none of this is in the movie. They are replaced with quips and banter that actually work for the movie. So what did Goddard do different from Weir? It's so simple you probably won't believe me. Weir was writing prose, which has one advantage over screenwriting. No one needs to say these lines out loud. None of these lines would remotely work if an actor had to say them. A screenplay must be acted out, which is where the most useful screenwriting technique comes in. What I'm about to share with you is the screenwriting equivalent of hermetic knowledge. To write good dialogue, you should say the lines out loud. Yeah, that's it. Speak the dialogue lines of your script after you finish the first draft. If they make you cringe, change them. I have yet to meet a good screenwriter who isn't doing this, and it will filter out probably 90% of all bad dialogue because something about it will just sound wrong to you. I do this for all my screenplays, and it consistently yields high ratings for my dialogue when I submit screenplays for script coverage. I wish video game writers would do this as well. So much of badly written dialogue could have been avoided. Especially in video games, it seems like there is no quality control whatsoever for the dialogue, and the writers must be the first stopping point to filter out the bad dialogue. Because if the project is unlucky, it might have a bad or unexperienced director. And both screen and voice actors are trained to be cringe tankies. What I mean by this is that they are trained not to feel self-conscious during a scene. It's really the only way to become a good actor. When you're on set during a scene, easily more than 20 people, depending on scene complexity, will watch you act out the scene. That's not a good environment to get self-conscious. I did an acting class back in film school, and that's a big part of the learning process. Learning to turn yourself into a fool and not feel cringe about it. So in essence, actors are trained to say the dumbest lines and not flinch.
You guys all read the script, right?
I don't read a script. Script reads me.
I'm just like a little boy playing with his dick when he's nervous.
Which is where good writers and directors come in, because the actors trust that you're going to do a good job. Another thing Goddard made sure is that no quips or banter undermine the drama. I'll show you in the spoilers section why that is so important for Project Hail Mary specifically. Alright, so what's Project Hail Mary about? Well, the sun is dimming with catastrophic consequences. It's being consumed by a cosmic parasite feeding off the sun's surface. Science teacher Ryland Grace wakes up on a spaceship with no recollection of who he is or how he got there. As his memory slowly returns, he soon discovers he's on his way to a star, seemingly unaffected by the parasite. As details of the mission unravel, he calls on his scientific training and sheer ingenuity, but he may not have to do it all alone. He is discovered by an alien ship, and on board is a sentient rock creature from the 40 Eridani system. Fittingly, Grace names the rock alien Rocky.
This is big brain time.
And so the two team up. Before we jump into spoilers, I quickly want to remind you of what makes a good dramatic arc. All dramatic arcs are vehicles for burning away the facade of the protagonist. We use conflict and obstacles to burn away this facade, to reveal the internal character flaw, the very reason why the story is happening to begin with. This way we can confront the protagonist with a simple but painful choice. Change or go down with your flaw. This is the core structure and purpose of all dramatic arcs with three-dimensional protagonists. In two-dimensional protagonists, this change doesn't happen internally, but instead is externalized to the supporting cast and environment. Just watch Dread from 2012. This is a perfect execution of a dramatic arc with a two-dimensional protagonist. Two-dimensional just means he doesn't change. Now, why is understanding this so important? Here's why. I get comments every now and then lamenting the fact that I insist on story being this structured. This idea is stifling my creativity is the usual complaint. Let me just say that you literally can't write a good story outside this meta structure because it simply ceases to be a story. The structure is the story and its purpose is change. I view storytelling as an alchemical process of transmutation. What you're doing as a storyteller is essentially the same as a shaman would do back in ancient times. Well, just minus the hallucinogens and near-death experience. Instead, your protagonist goes through the death and rebirth cycle, and the audience becomes a willing participant in it because of good acting and the Kuleshov effect in cinematography. Even movies that seemingly break this structure, like Pulp Fiction or Memento, they are still pretty much bound by it. Literally all of the writing gurus are saying the same thing once you align their structures along the midpoint, as you can see here. Alright, with this out of the way, let's jump into Project Hail Mary. Spoilers from here on out, because even when talking about the very beginning of this movie, I have to explain the purpose of it and how it's actually contributing from the get-go to this burning of the facade, which will culminate in the dark night of the soul of the main character. You can skip to this time code to avoid all spoilers. So the movie opens with Grace coming out of an artificially induced coma, and he is the lone survivor on board the Hail Mary ship, humanity's last-ditch effort to save their son and with it planet Earth. This whole opening sequence is blocked and filmed rather comically, but there is also a very on-the-nose symbolism that comes with it. Grace is clearly going through a metamorphosis. I mean, he's at one point literally moving around like a caterpillar stuck inside his sleeping bag. I like this symbolism. It fits the scientific and emotional themes of the movie, but in storytelling terms, what we're actually seeing is the beginning of a transmutation. This entire opening scene is a red herring. You see, the story is told across two temporal planes, two plot threads that interlock via flashbacks. In the flashbacks, we see the man Grace actually is, and in the present, we see the man Grace will actually become. In my opinion, this is a perfect use of flashbacks. Here's why. When you watch this movie for the first time, you're going to make a few assumptions. Mainly that this man, this sole survivor, is a competent hero. He must be, right? Why else was he chosen for this mission if he is not a competent hero who will take on the responsibility of saving mankind? Well, that's the big reveal. That's the facade. That's what is laid bare in the dark night of the soul by the end of the second act, when we finally unravel Grace's internal flaw. It's a lie we told ourselves from the get-go. This man's heroism is a facade. He is not a hero. He's actually just a self-serving coward who uses quips and banter as a defense mechanism to avoid taking on responsibility and to deal with the existential dread stemming from this mission.
And I ride a bike to work. And it's not for exercise.
So what the flashbacks do is they gradually build up to this revelation while simultaneously burning away Grace's facade and our perception of him. What actually happened is that Grace was forcibly sedated and put on the spaceship by the Project Hail Mary director after refusing to board it voluntarily. He never wanted to be a hero. He never wanted to save humanity. Instead, he actually wanted to stay behind and, well, watch the world descend into chaos as everyone starts fighting over the scraps. He even tries to run away before they sedate him. So why did he end up on the ship? See, that's where the midpoint comes in. It's another flashback, and I think this movie has a perfectly executed midpoint. Remember what I always say about midpoints. They have to be in the middle, raise the stakes, and deliver the key for transformation, which is our first hint of what's to come in the Dark Night of the Soul. It's like a little appetizer of the hero's flaw. The reason I call it a key for transformation is because it's a plot element that will inevitably force the hero to confront their flaw. So it basically opens a direct path to the protagonist's transformation. In this case, the midpoint is a giant explosion. The crew that was supposed to board the Hail Mary dies 3 days before launch while running experiments to use the parasite as a fuel source. This leaves Grace as the most qualified person on the planet to handle the parasite. This midpoint leads organically to his dark night of the soul, another flashback where we witness his freakout and refusal to become a hero after he's being asked to board the Hail Mary. We also finally understand why he uses quips and banter as a defense mechanism. The man has nothing else. He doesn't even know how to take on responsibility, let alone why he should. This all culminates in a wonderful moment where we find out that part of Grace's facade was also that he accepted his fate, that he accepted the suicide mission. That's how the two temporal lines interlock thematically. As it turns out, he never did. He simply used jokes to hide his pain. So when he finally catches a glimmer of hope, when Rocky offers him a path to get back to planet Earth, Grace finally breaks down. So now that we know his flaw, what happens next? Well, the hero must make a choice, overcome their flaw or go down with it. Grace spent so much time with Rocky that his optimism and responsibility rubbed off on him. Grace realizes that he has a fighting chance by doing the right thing. So they devise a very risky but doable plan, and together they enter the third act. In the third act is where I really fell in love with this movie. I just love the message of this script. Basically, every good third act has something that's called a high tower surprise. It's the moment the third act plan falls apart. A good example is The Matrix. The third act plan is to rescue Morpheus and bounce, leave the Matrix. But instead, Neo is left behind, and so he must confront Agent Smith head on as a high tower surprise.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
I'll keep it brief, but the third act surprise is that the antidote evolves to break containment, and it starts eating up the Hail Mary's fuel. Grace fixes this problem quickly, but he realizes that Rocky's entire ship is made of the same material as the containment unit, sealing his home planet's fate. Which means Grace must make a tough choice. He has only enough fuel to either return home or fly back to save Rocky. And this is where my favorite moment in the movie happens. The reason the Dark Night of the Soul is so important is because it brings the most intense suffering. The hero must suffer in order to change. Honestly, that's the only way change can happen. Because it's so painful, if the hero succeeds in overcoming his flaw, he will come out as a better person. He will have learned a valuable lesson. And so what happens in Project Hail Mary? The old Grace dies. He dies because of the transmutation. This Grace knows the value of voluntary self-sacrifice. So instead of returning home, he puts the antidote into space probes, sends them back to Earth, and returns to save Rocky. This is why I love this movie. It unabashedly says heroism is worth it. The spirit that compelled Grace to save both Earth and Rocky's home planet is the same spirit that compelled the first human to leave a cave. It's universal. This movie demonstrates why it's so damaging to deconstruct all symbols and all meaning. If you do so, you will be left with nothing. Nothing to animate you to reach for something higher. That's why I like to call it the spirit of a story. A spirit is simply that which animates you. By choosing voluntary self-sacrifice, Grace becomes the savior of mankind and goes on to experience unimaginable things that no human before him ever did. Forget being the first man on the moon. This guy becomes the first interstellar substitute teacher. The Iridians even offer to repair and refuel the Hail Mary, allowing Grace to return home. And that's Project Hail Mary. Let me know in the comments what you think of my breakdown, and if you have seen this movie already. Hope you had as much fun watching it as I did. Also, what other movies and their screenplays would you like to see a breakdown of? Just don't suggest musicals or pure dramas, because those are really not for me. I love doing these quick analysis videos because script doctoring is basically part of my bread and butter, and it's something I can produce quickly in between the mainline narrative arcade videos. In any case, let's hope Hollywood learns the right lessons from Project Hail Mary, and they give us that, but different.